Hello and welcome to Shannon Gardens. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this windy day. I hope everybody can hear me okay through this video. So in this week's video, I wanted to focus on some of the things that I am doing and tasks I'm attending to here in November and early December to help prepare for winter. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel like fall is kind of scattered all over the place because you're trying to prepare plants for the winter time, but it's also, particularly in my area, which is zone 7B, 8A in Georgia, we're still planting. So we can actually plant trees and shrubs through mid-December. And of course, we're also adding winter and fall color. So it just feels like you're kind of doing two things at once where you're planting different plants in the ground, but you're also cleaning up to prepare plants that are already in the ground for the next season. So I thought I would just go through what I'm doing and kind of get a grasp on everything that I'm doing in the garden and share with you guys what I'm doing and why. Now, there may be some plants that I refer to that are already entering dormancy. And if that's the case, then I'll make sure to insert some pictures or some video of the flowers while they're in bloom, just so you get an idea of the flowers and what I'm talking about and how they look when they are in their blooming season. All right, you guys, so with that, let's go ahead and dive on in. And the first thing that I thought that I would talk about is planning for fall and winter color. So with that, I'm looking at planting hellebores or Lenten roses, camellias, pansies, and violas, and snapdragons. Now, I've planted snapdragons and pansies a couple of weeks ago in my front garden, and I'll put a link to that video in the description if you'd like to learn more about that. But I planted some of those already. I have not moved to my back containers and my hanging pots, which I don't know if you guys noticed behind me, but those are missing right now because they have started to fizzle out. And so I need to go ahead and get those planted, and will be probably in the next week or so. To be honest with you, I haven't really been able to find really nice pansies and violas around me, so I'm still kind of on the lookout as far as getting those back containers planted. Now, I have planted hellebores in the past, and I'll insert a picture here of what those look like, or the Lenten roses, which do bloom in the wintertime. And it's so nice to have that color in the fall and winter. I feel like sometimes in the summer or spring when everything's blooming, nothing really stands out. But when you have something in the winter, it really stands out because there's so little in bloom during that season. And keeping with that, I'm also adding something this year, which I'm very excited about. And this is also in keeping with decorating for the holiday season as well. So I'll show that to you guys. So here it is. That is the camellia, the Yuletide camellia. So I've got my plant here, and there are tons of buds on here that are probably open, I would say, within the next few weeks to month. And I am very, very excited about this. So I'll go a little bit more into my camellia later and just tell you guys a little bit about it. But that is something that I will be adding to a container. Like I said, also to add it for my holiday season, because I do plan on putting lights on it. And I think with the red blooms on that plant, it'll look magnificent as the holidays approach. So that's one thing in my list that I'm really focused on here in this month, is adding that color to my garden, as well as trees or shrubs if I do plan on adding any. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to. I suppose it depends on if I come across any good deals or anything, but that is something that I would be focused on now if I wanted to go ahead and add those. Now, the next thing is something that I would be looking at more in mid-November, and that would be forcing bulbs indoors. I generally do not force bulbs indoors, but if I do, it's usually going to be an amaryllis. You can also do paper whites. I planted my paper whites actually outside, and they are starting to bloom now, believe it or not. I just planted them probably about 4 weeks ago and did a video on that. So I'll put a link to that video as well if y'all care to learn more about planting the bulbs and the lasagna method. But these are starting to bloom, and I'll share that with you guys. They're so cute. They're so pretty. But then I'm also going to be doing one amaryllis inside. I usually just get the amaryllis kit. So I got this one, I believe, at Home Depot, but all the big box stores generally have them. Even Costco had them last year, actually in these really pretty containers. But that's something that I'm going to be looking at doing here probably in the next week or so. So here are the paper whites that I just mentioned that are starting to bloom. They started probably a few days ago, And I just planted these in October. They smell absolutely beautiful and they just look so lovely. And I wanted to show you guys below the paper whites. I have the purple and kind of bluish purple pansies that I planted below there. So check out that video if you want to see how I planted these. But I just wanted to show you guys how these paper whites are starting to bloom. But of course, if you wanted to start forcing bulbs inside, then you can do that as well. Now, my next task is honestly something that I do year round, but I definitely like to keep on top of, or try to keep on top of, especially in the winter time, and that's feeding the birds. If that's something that you guys are interested in, I do put out suet and bird seed. Now, the funny thing is, usually I put away my hummingbird feeders around this time. I go ahead and clean them up and sterilize them and put them away for the winter. However, I have heard that some hummingbirds do come around through the winter in my area, so I'm going to leave one or two out. And just as I was about to make this video, probably 10 minutes prior, I was thinking about all this and thinking about the hummingbirds and how I hadn't seen any for a while, even though I still have salvia blooming and things like that. And lo and behold, I saw a hummingbird go up to my feeder. It was so ironic that I was just thinking about them, and here a hummingbird comes in. I felt like it was a sign, and they were telling me, yes, please leave hummingbird food out over the winter. So I'm going to do that this winter and just see if I have hummingbirds come up to them through the winter, or sporadically in the winter anyway. So with that, I do have my hummingbird feeder here, and it's all clean and ready to go. And I've got some freshly made hummingbird food. And to make the hummingbird food, I just have a cup of water and a quarter cup of white granulated sugar. I heat up the water and then put the sugar in and stir it around until it's dissolved and let it cool. And then I'll just add it to my hummingbird feeder to help feed those hummingbirds, like the little one that just visited me. So that's something I definitely want to do. Now, I did want to share with you guys also what kind of food I use for my bird feeders. Now, this is just my preference. I personally do not like the squirrels coming up and eating all of my seed and my suet. So I buy food that really detracts them from doing that. And the food that I found that works for me is the hot pepper. So this is hot pepper suet, and I use this pretty much year round, and the birds love it. The squirrels don't. So they stay away from my feeders, which is exactly what I want them to do. I don't want them tearing up my feeders and just sifting through all that seed. And that way my birds get their food. The same thing with the bird seed itself, and that has everything already mixed in together. The seed is ready to go and ready to use. And again, it just helps to keep those squirrels away, but the birds absolutely love it. Sometimes, particularly with the seed, you might find that it costs a little bit more, but I found in the end, at least for me, that it was worth it because it does keep the squirrels from eating it. So my seed actually lasts a lot longer than it did when I was just using regular seed. So I want to make sure to continue to feed my birds well through the winter. We have a lot of cardinals that stay around here in the winter time, and lots of birds to feed over the winter. So I love watching them and keeping them well fed. So the next thing that I'm going to be focusing on is cutting back some of my perennials. Now, we've had pretty warm temperatures up until, quite frankly, today when it's been a little bit cooler. So I have a lot of perennials that are still in bloom and just aren't ready really to be cut back yet. However, I have been able to cut back some on my daylilies and on a couple of different perennials. I'll take you guys to the garden here in just one moment, and I'll just show you the daylilies and how it looks when I'm ready to start cutting back or pulling that dead foliage off. Same thing with my Baptista, which is one of my earlier blooming perennials. So that I know is ready to go, and I can go ahead and pull those sticks off. And then I'll be cutting phlox back, but not today, but I will be cutting my garden phlox back and also my balloon flowers. So those are the ones that I will be looking at here in the next week or two, and that I've already started on, at least with the daylilies and with the Baptista. So I'll show those to you guys and just show you what they look like and how I'm cutting them back. And then with that in mind, as things start to die back here and continue to die back as the temperatures get colder in the next few weeks, I'll also be adding a layer of pine straw to help protect the roots of my perennials so that they will be protected through the winter and bloom and come up nicely in the spring. So let's go take a look at the garden, and I'll just show you guys some of those perennials that I'm cutting back now. Okay, so this is a good example of something that I can go ahead and pull. These sticks are my Baptista and they are done. So I can go ahead and just pull this off, and I literally can pull it straight out of the ground. I don't know if you guys can see that. It does not even need to be cut. A lot of times these come off on their own and they just kind of look like tumbleweed in my garden until I go place it in the woods. But that's all I'm doing here with the Baptista is literally just pulling up these sticks. I mean, they are already coming out of the ground, so I can just pull this and kind of clean it up a little bit here. Now here I have balloon flowers, which, and I know it does not look pretty now, but about a week ago, before the rains came through, these leaves were the most beautiful golden yellow. It was almost just as pretty as the balloon flowers themselves. Every time in the fall, I just think it's absolutely gorgeous, the leaf color that they turn. But now you can tell they're done. Again, I can just pull it up. It doesn't even need to be cut. These are just lifting out of the ground, so I can just go ahead and lift these out and recycle these where I have my piles of sticks and leaves and things like that in the woods. So again, these are balloon flowers, and I'm going to go ahead and clean up that. I've got my Baptista that I just showed you guys I'm cleaning up, and then we'll go visit the daylilies. So here I have a daylily plant, and I've been working on it as it dies back. So it's much smaller than the actual plant is when it's in full bloom. But I am just raking my fingers through here and getting the dead ends off that way, and also pulling up the dead stems that the flowers were on. And I just found that that's the easiest way for me to clear everything out rather than cutting them. So I'll just go through and rake it, and then that will be finished. Here's another daylily. Now this one is greener than the other one. It actually doesn't get as much sun, but again, I'm just going to kind of pull these through, pull out the dead stuff. No need, I don't use scissors. I just pull and then leave the green until it's ready to be pulled as well. I can pull out these stems that had the flowers and just kind of pull everything out and neaten it up too. So in keeping with protecting my perennials, and I mentioned that I was going to be adding that pine straw to the perennial garden here in the next few weeks, there are a couple of perennials that I actually need to overwinter. Now, I don't have a lot of room to overwinter perennials or keep them inside, and so I have to be very picky with what I'm doing. This year, I'm going to be pulling in my Royal Cape Plumbago. Now, that is annual in my area. It's perennial and in warmer areas than mine, but I have read that you can overwinter it. I have mine in a container, and the footprint of the container is actually pretty small. So I'm just going to be moving that into my garage, and I hope that it overwinters well. I'm really excited to give it a try. I haven't tried it before, and this is one of my most expensive annuals that I get every year. I absolutely love it. It's a beautiful annual, and so I'm just very excited to try overwintering it and see if I don't have to buy it again next year, if I can actually get it to live. So the second plant that I am planning on overwintering is the abutilon, and it is absolutely beautiful. This is actually the second year that I'll be overwintering it, but I am starting it from my own cuttings and will have the parent plant in the garage as well. So I'm trying it two different ways, which I haven't done before. So we'll go take a look at that one here in just a moment. And you guys keep an eye out for a video that I'm planning on putting out about this plant. It's really unique. I can't wait to share information about it with you guys. All right, you guys, and then we have the beautiful abutilon. This is the other plant that I'm overwintering in addition to the plumbago. This is also known as flowering maple, and it does resemble maple leaves, but look at these flowers. They are so beautiful. Now, I actually have already moved this into the garage and then bringing it out during the day just because it is dipping a little bit lower in temperature than what this plant generally prefers, but it's got tons of buds on it. So I'm really hoping that this plant continues to bloom. I did overwinter it indoors last year, which I'll be taking a cutting and doing that as well. And it did bloom off and on indoors when I overwintered it. So I'm really hoping that that's the case this year as well. But I just wanted to show you guys. Now this plant was 8 inches tall maybe when I bought it, and now it is 3 to 4 feet tall. So it definitely is a fast grower. I've only had it in a container. I did not plant it in ground this year, and I imagine that I'll continue to keep it in containers so that I can bring it in and overwinter it each year. But I just wanted to share that with you guys and keep a lookout for a video on this plant. I do plan on putting one out and giving you guys more information about what I've learned about the plant so far in owning it. Okay, and then lastly, in the garden, I'm really looking to start collecting everything for holiday decorating. And I'm really going to start now, and that begins with my Yuletide camellia. I will be getting some different plants and then doing the pansies and violas, like I mentioned, in containers as well to decorate for the holiday season. I can't wait, and I'm ready to get started on it. Now, the Yuletide camellia is actually one that I picked up at Lowe's. I did a video from Lowe's about a week ago, and I'll put a link to that at the end of this video and also in the description. But I looked around and kind of price shopped after doing that video for the Yuletide camellia to see how other prices compared. And honestly, this was a really good price, at least in my area. So I did end up going back to Lowe's and getting that Yuletide camellia. Now, I mentioned earlier that I am actually placing my Yuletide camellia, at least for this season, in a container, but I will be moving it out into the landscape probably in the springtime. And I do have a pretty good idea of where I want it to go. Now, it does get rather large, but it's a moderate grower, so it's not going to get really big anytime soon, but it grows about 8 to 10 feet tall and about 6 to 8 feet wide. And it has single red blooms. It gets its name, Yuletide, because that's where it generally tends to bloom, is around that holiday season. And it's just covered in red blooms anywhere from fall through the holiday season, maybe even into January as well. So it really has a nice long bloom time. It's drought tolerant, it's deer resistant, it attracts birds and butterflies, and it's evergreen. So I'm very excited to have this and to add it in. And I think with lights on it for the holidays, especially when it's blooming, it's red blooms. I think the lights reflecting through that are just going to be so pretty. So I'm very excited to have that in my container. Here is my Yuletide camellia. Just look at that beautiful red bloom. I'm so excited about this. You can see it's got the dark green glossy leaves here. And I think that as the backdrop to the red flowers are going to be so pretty. And look at all these buds. I don't know if you guys can see this, but there are just so many buds all over this plant. I really thought it looked so nice and was really a good deal, at least in my area from what I was finding. So like I mentioned, I did go back to Lowe's and end up getting this plant. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm so excited to get to these tasks, to plant some new plants, get ready for the holidays, and to protect my plants that I already have while adding color to my containers and to the garden for the season. So thank you so much again. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so that you guys can be notified each time I upload a new video. All right, you guys, until next time, happy gardening and goodbye.